The tension in Los Angeles had been building for weeks, ever since Katie Logan debuted her new fashion line with a boldness that astonished even her closest supporters. Logan Fashion, as she named it, was supposed to be her new beginning, a means to escape the lengthy shadows thrown by Forrester Creations and her sister Brooke's constant limelight. Katie had put everything into it, her savings, her determination, and, most importantly, a secret partnership with Eric Forrester himself. Eric, the great designer who had built an empire, had secretly consented to contribute his expertise to her cause. It began innocently enough, a late-night talk in which Eric, agitated by his health scares and family conflicts, admitted he missed the pleasure of creating without the continual intrusion of Ridge or corporate politics. Katie listened, provided understanding, and before long, a deal was reached. Designs were sketched in private, materials were surreptitiously procured, and a debut show was planned to reveal Eric as the line's primary visionary. But secrets in the fashion industry rarely remain hidden. Word spread, possibly by a careless murmur from Donna, Eric's wife and Katie's sister, or from someone at Forrester who noted Eric's odd absence. The reveal happened at the worst conceivable time, during Katie's press conference and runway debut. As models walked out in Eric's signature exquisite lines, flowing dresses with rich embellishments that screamed Forrester heritage, Brooke and Ridge stormed in like wildfire. Brooke's face was a mask of rage, and Ridge's jaw clenched in betrayal. They confronted Katie publicly, accusing her of snatching Eric, exploiting him, and humiliating him by displaying his work without his full permission. The room erupted with flashes and murmurs. Katie stayed firm, arguing that the designs were legally hers, paid for fairly and squarely with Bill Spencer's assistance. But the harm had been done. Eric, watching from the wings, felt the weight of conflicting loyalties crush him. Days passed in a whirl of headlines and quiet phone conversations. Katie retreated to her Logan office, staring at mood boards and doodles that felt polluted. She questioned whether she had gone too far, if her ambition had cost her the only genuine connection she had made in this chaotic industry. Eric, meanwhile, struggled with his conscience in the Forrester estate. Ridge demanded explanations, Brooke pled for family unity, but Eric's thoughts kept returning to Katie's calm strength, the way she believed in him when others dismissed him as a frail relic. He couldn't shake his guilt. Finally, one evening as the sun set low over the hills, Eric made his decision. He drove to Katie's house, the exact location where they had first spoken openly months before. The house was peaceful, with dim lights in the living room. Katie opened the door, surprise spreading across her features before hardening into guarded caution. She allowed him in without speaking. They stood in the entryway for a long time, the air heavy with unsaid sadness. Eric appeared older, with deeper creases around his eyes, yet his voice remained firm as he spoke. He had practiced this, going over the lines in his head, while driving. Katie crossed her arms, ready for another apology or a demand to draw the connection. Instead, Eric took a deep breath and let out 7 words, each one hitting like a silent detonation. "I'm leaving Forrester to stay with you." Katie blinked, the declaration hanging between them. She examined his face for a joke, a trick, or anything other than sincerity. But Eric's gaze remained fixed, no evasion. He explained slowly, the words tumbling as the dam had broken. He'd spent decades developing Forrester Creations with Stephanie, then struggling to keep it with Ridge and Steffi, each pulling on the legacy like strands in an unraveling tapestry. But now, the joy has vanished. Arguments, health problems that reminded him that time was short, and the awareness that his family saw him as a figurehead rather than a creator. Katie's situation was different. She listened. She challenged him without being dismissive. She allowed him to design freely, without committees or egos dictating each thread. The launch, however chaotic, rekindled something in him, a light he had thought had been doused for a long time. Katie shook her head, not in denial but in disbelief. "You can't just leave your family, Eric. Ridge will never forgive you, and Brooke will make sure the entire city knows." Eric nodded, realizing the impending storm. He knew Ridge would consider it as the ultimate betrayal, a father choosing a rival over his own blood. Brooke would portray it as Eric being duped, and she would even question Katie's motives again. But he was tired of living up to expectations. He told Katie about the late evenings she spent sketching alone, and how her vision for Logan felt genuine, empowering women like her sisters, but on her terms. He wanted to construct something new, not just repair the old empire. They went to the living room and sat on the couch, where many ideas had been formed. Katie poured the drink with trembling hands. She expressed her own concerns, that the pandemonium of the introduction had harmed her reputation, that buyers were hesitant, and that Logan may falter if Eric's name was not openly associated. But his words changed everything. If he committed fully, not as a hidden contributor, but as co-founder, main designer, and partner, the line could soar above the scandal. It would be Eric Forrester and Katie Logan, beginning a new chapter. However, she was concerned about the consequences. Donna would be divided between her husband and sister. Bill would gloat, seeing it as a victory over Forrester. And the press would feast. Eric leaned forwards, his voice softening. He spoke about legacy. Not the one passed down through generations of Forresters, but the one he could select right now. He wished to collaborate with someone who valued heart as much as haute couture. Katie felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in years. She had always been the dependable sister, picking up the pieces after Brooke's tragedies or Bill's plots. Eric was offering her collaboration, trust, and a future in which she would not be second best. However, it was difficult to gain trust. She posed the difficult question. What if he regretted it? What if familial pressure drew him back? Eric promised that he had thought it out. He'd talked to Ridge first, explaining that it wasn't desertion, but evolution. He made it obvious that Forrester will always remain his foundation, but he needed room to breathe and develop. As the night progressed, the topic turned practical. They discussed the next steps, including revealing Eric's full commitment and even issuing a joint statement to dispel the rumors. New designs to revitalize the line following the controversy. Hiring additional staff to help with the workload. Katie's imagination raced with possibilities. Runway presentations in Paris, collaborations with rising artists, and a brand that combined Eric's timeless elegance with her current edge. For the first time since the launch failure, hope flashed. But doubts lingered. Eric admitted that he hesitated before driving over. He'd stood in his study, glancing at old images of Stephanie, Ridge as a youngster, and the family empire at its peak. Walking away felt like cutting a limb. But then he remembered Katie's expression during the confrontation, how she kept her head up despite the allegations. That strength impacted him more than remorse ever could. Katie, for her part, stated that she had expected him to stand with Ridge and either demand the designs back or quit. His appearance, those 7 words, took her by surprise in the finest way. They talked till the early hours, laying out not only business but also something deeper, mutual respect that had gradually developed into affection. Not romance in the spectacular soap opera sense, but a deep bond formed through shared battles and creative fire. Eric promised to handle the family fallout cautiously, beginning with a private dinner where he would lay everything out. Katie agreed to stand by him if necessary to demonstrate that it was not stealing, but rather a decision. By the time Eric left, the sky had begun to brighten. He hesitated at the door and returned with a slight smile. "This could be extraordinary," he remarked. Katie nodded and felt the weight lift somewhat. "It already is." Over the next few days, ripples spread. Eric's announcement shocked the industry. Ridge initially reacted with rage, followed by hurt silence. Brooke alternated between fury and reluctant understanding. Donna mediated, heartbroken but proud. The press made headlines like, "Eric Forrester defects to Logan. Fashion war escalates." But behind the scenes, Katie and Eric worked quietly, sketching late into the night and polishing visions. Logan fashion gained traction, with orders flooding in as curiosity turned to admiration. The scandal became the backstory, while the relationship became the main story. Katie got validation, while Eric discovered a new sense of purpose. Together, they demonstrated that the most shocking statements aren't charges or betrayals, but rather straightforward declarations of change. In a world of transitory fads, their partnership felt enduring, a testimony to second chances, creative freedom, and the fortitude to pursue one's own path, no matter the consequences. Eric had spent the majority of the morning pacing the length of his living room, his mind wrapped in a web of anxiety, regret, and haste. The sunlight flowing through the huge windows did little to alleviate the chill he felt within. Every step he took seemed to raise the same question. Was it too late? He paused near the fireplace, placing one hand on the mantel and stared blankly at a framed portrait depicting a happier time. Things seemed simpler back then. Everything felt brittle now, as if a single wrong word could shatter what little remained. Katie had been on his mind constantly. He couldn't ignore the notion that something had changed, that something vital needed his attention before it slipped beyond his grasp. Their previous talk had been quick and tense, full with hidden truths and feelings that neither of them had dared to completely confront. He knew Katie well enough to identify when she was holding back or protecting herself by erecting walls that were nearly impossible to scale. But Eric was also aware that such walls were frequently an indication that she needed someone to burst through them. That was why he couldn't stay away anymore. The drive to Katie's residence seemed longer than usual. Traffic lights appeared to stay red for much too long, and each new minute heightened his anxiousness. He rehearsed what he wanted to say repeatedly, but nothing felt right. Words, he knew, had a habit of failing him when it counted most. Nonetheless, he had to try. He had to say something that would cut through the tension, something honest and undeniable. When he eventually arrived outside her house, he sat in the car for a bit, gripping the steering wheel tightly. His heart hammered in his chest, so he took a deep breath and tried to steady himself. This was not simply another talk. This was a tipping point that could either bring them together or push them apart. He climbed out of the car and walked to the front door, each step filled with expectation. The familiar surroundings were strange today, filled with uncertainty. He raised his hand and knocked, and the sound echoed louder than he anticipated. Katie responded quickly. When she opened the door, her demeanor changed from surprise to guarded. She hadn't expected him, that was apparent. There was a brief silence between them. They simply stood there, facing each other, the weight of their unspoken words hanging in the air. "Eric," she finally murmured, her tone measured. "What are you doing here?" He swallowed hard, looking into her eyes for some glimmer of warmth, any indication that he wasn't utterly unwanted. "I needed to see you," he responded. "I couldn't wait any longer." Katie paused, peering beyond him as if debating whether to let him in. There was a moment of doubt, but it was swiftly hidden. "This isn't a good time," she remarked, her voice lacking confidence. "I know," Eric confessed, "but it is vital. Please." Something in his words must have struck a chord with her, since she stepped aside to let him in after a little while. The door closed softly behind them, enclosing them in a chamber packed with tension and unresolved feelings. They moved into the living room, keeping a safe distance from one another. Katie crossed her arms, a slight but clear indication that she was on alert. Eric took note of every detail, the way she avoided direct eye contact, the tiny stiffness in her shoulders, and the way her fingers tapped lightly against her arm. "I don't have much time," she explained. "So, whatever you came to say, just say it." Her words were direct, yet they conveyed a deeper meaning, perhaps hurt or exasperation. Eric knew he needed to proceed with caution, but he also knew he couldn't afford to wait. "I've been thinking about you," he explained. "About us." Katie let out a low sigh, as if she had anticipated this. "Eric, we've previously discussed this. There's nothing further to say." "That is not true," he insisted, his tone stern but not harsh. "There was so much we didn't say, things we avoided. And I can't keep pretending it's not important." She shook her head, looking away slightly. "What's done is done." "I'm not trying to change the past," he stated. "I'm trying to understand it." Katie laughed gently, but it wasn't humorous. "Fix it? Do you really think it's that simple?" "No," Eric confessed. "I understand that it is not simple, but that doesn't mean it's impossible." They fell silent again, this time more intensely. Katie approached the window and stared out, as if looking for answers beyond the glass. Eric watched her, his chest constricting as the space between them grew. This isn't just about the past, he explained. It is about what comes next. Katie turned back to face him, her eyes piercing. So, what exactly are you suggesting? This was it. The moment he had been preparing for. The reason he had come here despite his doubts and fears. He took a step forward, his gaze fixed and his voice unyielding. I've never stopped loving you. I was wrong. The words hung in the air, having an instant and undeniable impact. 7 simple words, yet they contained the weight of all he had been experiencing and struggling to articulate. Katie's expression changed immediately. The guarded countenance disappeared, giving way to something more vulnerable and genuine. She stared at him, as if attempting to understand what she had just heard. Don't, she replied quietly, her voice trembling. Don't say things like that if you don't mean them. I do mean them, Eric told me. Every word. She shook her head and stepped back. You can't just show up here and say that like it's going to fix everything. I know it doesn't fix everything, the man replied. But this is the truth. And you deserve to hear it. Katie's eyes welled up with emotion, despite her efforts to conceal it. Where was the truth before? She asked. Where was it when it counted? It always mattered, Eric stated. I just didn't realize how much until I risked losing you. The honesty in his voice made it tough to ignore his comments completely. Katie averted her gaze, her composure fraying under the strain of everything she had been holding back. You hurt me, she whispered, scarcely rising above a whisper. More than you probably realize. I understand, he murmured softly. And I apologize. I can't change what happened, but I can assure you that I learned from it. She wiped her eyes, irritated with herself for allowing her emotions to show. Promises are easy, she said. It's actions that matter. Then let me show you, he replied. Give me an opportunity to prove that I'm serious. That I would not make the same mistakes again. Katie paused, conflicted between the instinct to protect herself and the overwhelming pull of the emotions she had worked so hard to suppress. She had created walls for a reason, and tearing them down now felt hazardous, even dangerous. I don't know if I can trust you, she said. That's fair, Eric responded. I don't expect you to trust me immediately, but I'm willing to earn it, however long it takes. His determination to be patient, to meet her where she was, appeared to reach her in a way that his previous remarks had not. She examined him closely, looking for any indication that this was yet another false promise. But what she saw was earnestness, a determination that felt different than before. You're asking for a lot, she remarked. I know, he responded, but you're worth it. Another pause ensued, but this one seemed different. It wasn't as heavy or as suffocating. There was still confusion and doubt, but there was also something new, something that had not been present before. Hope. Katie took a deep breath, her shields gradually decreasing. I can't give you an answer right now, she told me. I need some time to think. That's okay, Eric answered. Take all the time you need. He stopped pushing. He did not try to rush her or force a decision. Instead, he simply stood there, giving her the space she required while emphasizing that he wasn't going anywhere. Katie was able to look at him without feeling angry or resentful for the first time since he arrived. She saw someone eager to fight for her, someone who had finally mustered the strength to say what needed to be said. The route forward was unclear, and there were no promises. But as they stood there, facing each other with honesty and openness, it was obvious that something had changed. Those 7 words changed everything. It was unclear if they would result in healing or grief, but one thing was certain. Neither of them would forget this moment.